It's interesting. I was reading an interview with you where you spoke about how you've always been quite committed to not just portraying the positive aspects of yourself in your music and your songwriting, but also the negative, and kind of giving a full picture of yourself and not being afraid to share anything. Was that something you were able to do from when you first started songwriting, or was that a point you kind of had to get to?
I don't know. They're kind of not as like when I first started making music, it definitely wasn't as personal. I mean, it was and it wasn't. I feel like when I listen to it now, sometimes it is like so cringe. It's very emo. Other times it was more like overtly satirical. It was, how could I describe it? I mean, I was listening to a lot of bands like the Dead Milkmen and stuff. And so like, I was trying to be funny a lot of times, or like make some sort of ironic commentary on like society as a whole. But then later, I guess I started doing like, this is bands before TV Girl. Some bands were like really overtly emotional. I was actually digging up some of this old music recently, and it was like kind of hard to listen to for a lot of reasons.
Did you not have a Moldy Peaches cover band type thing?
It wasn't a Moldy Peaches cover band. I had a band and we did cover the Moldy Peaches. That's
okay.
Definitely happened. That was my band, the Ginger Snaps, in college. We covered not one, but two different Moldy Peaches songs. At least one show we did 2 songs from Moldy Peaches. I quite like them. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff I was doing was like sort of, I really loved Adam Green and just like talking nonsense and saying crazy stuff sometimes. And yeah, they were definitely strangely kind of influential, at least to me back then. I still like that band, but...
Was it a rap cover group, actually? Is that where I'm getting that idea from?
No, I had a different band, and we did play 2 shows, and it was a rap cover band. That was also in college. We just played parties and stuff, so that wasn't really like a real band per se.
Just a kind of fun musical outlet, as opposed to one that's a lot more serious.
Definitely. I mean, I wouldn't call the Ginger Snaps serious, but that was my band. Like that, that was my real band. And then I had this other band, the Super Rap All Stars, and we played 2 parties in college, and I did Nas songs and like Jay-Z and some other, forget who else, Outkast, and I can't remember who else.
Is this around the Son of Sam time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Is that what kind of got you into making beats then?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I was like, in college, I got really into listening to hip hop. I loved hip hop, still love hip hop. And I started making beats on a computer. I think because I was really into Paul's Boutique, that album. Specifically, I think that's the one that really got me like, opened my eyes to just how cool it was to do like, sampling and to sort of like combine disparate elements and all that stuff. So I started making beats, and I tried to like make beats for other rappers at first, but those beats were really like, primitive. If I listen to them now, they're like pretty basic and like not very good, but didn't ever get any other rappers to rap on them. But I was just learning. And then I guess when TV Girl started, we had the idea I had another band with Trung, who was the other guy who started TV Girl. And it was like sort of a Beatles-esque guitar band that was like kind of, we were trying to make like girl group style music. We were really into girl groups like the Shirelles and just Phil Spector, kind of, the Crystals, all that stuff.
Shirelles, that's like Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so we just had this band that was doing that, and we were trying to like be as faithful to that as possible. And then we started TV Girl, we had the idea that like, what if we just like tried to make that kind of music still, but like just was completely like electronic, and there's be samples and stuff, and that'd be at least be something different that like, I don't know, I never really heard someone do that so much before. So that was kind of the genesis of TV Girl at first. Has
what you look for in a sample changed since then, or is that something that's remained consistent for you?
I don't know. I feel like it's mostly the same. I look for catchy things that just sound pretty most of the time. And that's been pretty consistent. I'd say nowadays, I definitely think it's cooler to use like something more obscure or something that's like harder to sort of like mold into something that sounds good, instead of back then I would just kind of rip like, I don't know, like a full Todd Rundgren intro if I thought it sounded good. And now I think it's better to just if you took like one chord from something and then a different chord from another song, and like no one can even tell where they came from. Like to me, that's more interesting to do nowadays.
Just because you're completely making something new from it.
Yeah, it does feel like you are constructing something new that's totally like that you can at least claim a little bit more ownership over, if not legally, then at least like, personally.
Emotionally.
Yeah.
What about when you're pulling a sample from like a TV show or something? Because now you're looking for something catchy. At that point, is it more coming down to the words rather than the rhythm of it, or?
A lot of times, I guess I'm trying to find, if it's like a vocal sample, it's something that sort of relates to the theme of the music is what I try to do. Because I mean, like I've said before, I mean, it's funny, if you make a hip hop beat or like a cool spacey beat, you could literally pretty much put anything of people talking over it and it'll sound like cool for some reason. You know what I mean? Like you could have some beat and then you could have, Winston Churchill talking about something in the 30s and it would sound cool just because, I don't know. It's just for some reason, people talking over hip hop beats is cool. It sounds cool. So anybody could do that and they might want to do that. But to me, it's interesting or it's just better if it somehow relates to the music. You know what I mean? The song, the lyrics.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because on the Bloodbath LP, you're kind of getting a little bit more abstract in terms of both the samples and what you're doing lyrically.
Well, yeah, I mean, because that one, I mean, that project it was fun because, I didn't hold myself to those standards when I was making that record. I was like, well, I'll just put whatever sounds good, because this isn't really my real band. It's not like an artistic statement to me, the way that like I think a TV Girl record should be.
It's kind of a little bit like Talking Headsy in terms of what it's done lyrically. Like, it's strange because although it feels abstract, it also feels like there's some kind of weighted meaning to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I couldn't get away from, when I started writing songs, it's easier for me to write something if I have some sort of, actual idea and I want to say something, because I would love to write something like the Talking Heads or like, Beck or Pavement, where they a lot of times truly do just like nonsense lyrics that don't really make any literal sense at all, but they're still good sometimes. But I don't know. I've never been able to write like that, or I've never really tried.
When it's interesting, you were mentioning that the Bloodbath LP kind of felt like something a little bit separate. When was the seed for it first planted in your mind, and did it come as the idea for a side project?
Well, it all started because we went on tour with George Clanton. Do you know George Clanton?
Yeah, vaporwave guy.
Yeah, he's like a vaporwave, pioneer, impersonario. What do you call it? Svengali. And we were just in the van, and he was talking about how he was about to put on the world's first vaporwave festival, and he was talking all about it. And I thought it sounded cool, and I thought it was a great idea. So I was like, I want to get in on this. Like, I got to make a vaporwave project. Like, how hard could it really be to make this music? Like pretty much just joking around with him. Like, so easy. You just like take an old 80s song, slow it, put reverb on it, and boom, you got like a classic vaporwave song. And then I was like, and then it's easy to come up with a name too. You just like, something from the 90s that like sounds kind of just like vague and evocative. And I was just like, like a fake video game, like a Nintendo 64 game, like a fake Nintendo 64 game, like Bloodbath 64. I just came up with it right there. We all thought it was funny. When I got home, I just started to do that. I was like, I'm just going to do like a vaporwave album real quick. Like, I'm just going to make one. Like, how hard could it be? Then I started making it, and I was like, man, some of this is actually sounding like cool to me. Like, so I started putting a little more thought into it. I tried to make it actually kind of good. I couldn't help it. And so that was just basically joking around with George. That's how it all started. And I just kind of took that joke to completion instead of just bullshitting in the van. But he still didn't invite me to perform at the festival. Oh, well.
Was there something in that mindset, that idea of not putting any pressure on yourself and just making something for a joke, that kind of bled into it musically? Definitely.
I mean, that was it was fun to make. Like, I made it in 2 weeks, like, because I didn't care. I was like, it doesn't really need to be great. I'm just doing it as a joke anyway. So like, I'm just going to do whatever the first thing that comes to my mind. Yeah. I mean, it's like, that's what's, it's fun to do side projects like that, because there is a part of me that wants to make big, artistic statements and hold it up to be judged in that way. And that's what TV Girl to me is for. But that's not the only reason I would want to make music, or it's not the sole purpose of music. I mean, I think it's a shame, because, a lot of people, I think, get stuck in that, unfortunately get stuck into like having their records be judged. If you're St. Vincent or whatever, and you put out a classic record, like everyone's going to look at your next record and judge it against that one. And like, what's wrong with St. Vincent just like fucking around on the guitar for an album and like just making something that's just, fun instead of like a major artistic statement? I'm sure she would love to do that, but it's hard once you get stuck in that cycle. So I think at least with this, when it's a side project, it's easy to separate those two impulses.
Was Maddie Acid like a similar thing for you in that regard?
Totally.
That kind of a similar free thing, yeah.
Definitely. I mean, that was really fun because like with those lyrics, I was just like, I'm not going to have that. They don't have to make sense. They just like, it's just going to be pure wordplay. Like just trying to come up with a funny line, it's no emotion behind it, nothing like that. So that was just fun. It was like purely fun, it was really cool, fun to make that record. Could
the French Exit outtakes also take on a similar role that you released last year? Because you kind of have that sticker of outtakes on it, it takes the pressure off and it's more something a little different, or?
I mean, yeah, in a way, because when you say it's outtakes, I mean, it's not, you're kind of just saying outright that like, these aren't, these weren't the best of the best. These were just like what we had lying around, and this just didn't make the cut, but they still might be worth hearing. But at least I was trying, when I made those songs, I was trying to write like a really good song.
How come you came to release them?
We were going to release them because we were going to do this tour, the 6.5-year anniversary of French Exit, where we're going to play the album in full. That's the tour that we're going to still do now, but just got delayed for 1.5 years. And we were just going to like put that out to basically promote the tour.
Do you find you make music more often during the day or at night?
I don't know. Either one. It's not really a daytime thing. It's more of like, I'll go through periods of just not making music at all for a long time. And then when I do start getting serious about it, I'll pretty much work on it all day until it's done. That's kind of the state I'm in at the moment.
With a new TV Go record?
Yeah.
Kind of like 12-hour days?
No, definitely not 12-hour days. But I'll work on it every day if I have a chance to. Like this morning, we have to do rehearsals for the tour, which takes up a lot of the day. But like this morning, I woke up, even though I was hungover, and I worked on the music a little bit. We'll go do rehearsals, and then when I come home later, I'll probably work on it some more.
Do you find once you kind of get to a point where you're happy with it, will you leave it for a little bit to come back to it with some more perspective?
Just the nature of actually finalizing the songs takes so long that I listen to them, again and again and again. It takes so long to sort of finish a record that by the time you get at the point where you're finishing it, I've already listened to it more than anyone else on the planet will ever listen to it. So, I mean, you naturally kind of like get some perspective on it that way, I think.
How long will you be in this period then that you're in at the moment, where you're working on it every day?
Kind of hard to say because, let's see, realistically, we probably want to put it out with the vinyl, and there's like a 6 months turnaround time for vinyl. So if I finished it in the next 2 months, then it wouldn't, it's going to come out next year at the very least. So it's going to be 6 months or more, probably like a year, honestly, from this point to putting it out, if I had to guess.
I was just thinking back to what we were saying about the Bloodbath record and how it initially started off as a jokey thing, but then you kind of decided you wanted to take it and make it good and make it a little bit more serious. Is that because, do you think you need to be challenged to be like creatively fulfilled? Is that where that's coming from? I was just thinking about it there.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, like I said, I started working on the beats as a joke. I was just like, I'm going to do this real quick. Like it's basically just going to be like a parody of vaporwave. I'm just going to take old 80s beats, slow them down. Like that's what some vaporwave albums are. And those are good. I like those albums. And it's going to be really easy. I'm not going to put any work into it. I'm just going to basically prove how easy it is to make. But then I started making it, I was just like, man, these are actually cool. Like I should put a little more thought into it, like kind of try to make it cohesive. And if I do write lyrics for it, like they should be kind of good, at least not just totally bad.
With the way that you had such a strong concept for the album and what you wanted it to be, will you do a similar thing when you're working on a TV Go record? Will you figure out what exactly it is you want to do and then kind of pursue it from there?
Sometimes. For this new record, definitely. Sort of a strong conceptual element to it. It's sort of going to be like very gospel, soul-influenced music. Sort of like a take on gospel music from a perspective of someone who's not religious. Sort of like hopeless gospel music, but instead of hopeful and empowering, it's hopeless and despairing, but has the sort of the music is going to be very evocative of the music that is empowering and what would be the word, inspirational. And so there's going to be a dissonance between the content of the lyrics and the sound of the music, which has kind of always been there in TV Girl.
Does it give it a distance, do you think?
In what way?
In terms of emotionally, do you feel like there's a slight distance to it as a result of that? Making a record about, faith in that, or hope in that way?
No, because I feel those things. I mean, I feel despairing. I feel hopeless sometimes. So it's not hard to get into that mindset, especially, the way the world is right now and just the way life is. It's very easy to just kind of get into that headspace, for me at least. So the lyrics are pretty personal, and I feel all the things that I'm going to be saying on this record for the most part. But there is some distance in that, it is sort of playing with the tropes of gospel music. So there is sort of a cheekiness to them, for sure.
What about, it's interesting what you're saying, that you find it easy to get into that headspace where you can speak about those things. What about for the inverse, when you're working on the music and it's kind of tackling the inverse of that? Is it a different process to get into the mood for making music of that nature? Well,
it's funny because most times I like things to be upbeat and sort of catchy when I listen to music. That's the kind of music I like. To sound like that, I don't really listen to like stuff that's very depressing a lot of times. Sometimes I do, but at least it has to be catchy and have a good melody most times for me to really like music. So I don't know. For me, that's sort of the bottom line. A song has to be catchy. That's like kind of just a baseline for me to like it.
Does the headspace differ when you're working on music as opposed to lyrics, creatively for you?
Does the headspace? No, I mean, I feel like it's all, because I write lyrics and make music pretty much like at the same time. I don't make the beat and then write the lyrics later. I'll be working on the beat and then I'll be listening to it and something will start to come to me. And no, it's not. It's all one headspace because it's all a holistic process. Life is, emotions are complicated. Sometimes there's hope and despair, and vice versa. You know what I mean? Nothing's really one way or the other in anything in life. You know what I'm talking about? Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's always there's always a juxtaposition, it seems to be at the heart of everything.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always things that are pulling you in different directions.
If a song sounds kind of, superficially happy and there's depressing lyrics, well, there's a lot of analogous things in life that are like that. Almost everything, someone can look happy and feel sad on the inside, vice versa. Things can be good now and bad, even when they're going to be bad later. So there's always that juxtaposition. So I feel like it is a holistic process. It's not separate.
Yeah, it seems something. It's like that contrast always seems to be very ripe for exploring creatively as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the sweet spot is, when you really kind of dig at, if you can do or say something that really kind of gets at the heart of how, I don't want to say complicated life can be, but just how paradoxical it can be, that's where the truth really is.
In between those lines.
Yeah. So if you can say something that kind of really gets to the heart of that, I mean, that's like, I feel like that's really, then you really have hit something that will resonate, at least for me. When people put out a music that's very empowering, it feels phony to me. Or even if the opposite, something that's like, very, very depressive, like, I don't know, some goth music or especially metal music, like it's comical when they're singing these lyrics. If you listen to like black metal lyrics and they're just like, a parody of like the dark despair, it's like, well, no one even really thinks like that. These guys who are making this music are probably joking around with their friends while they're in the studio. They're not really like this.
You can sense that falseness.
Yeah, definitely. And the opposite is true when you listen to someone who makes really happy or empowering music, like, I don't know, Beyonce or something. That she has a lot of darkness in her life and she doesn't really even feel the things. She doesn't really believe what she's singing when she makes really empowering music. Or an even better example would be this gospel music, which is very interesting because it's so lyrically, the gospel music that I've been listening to, I really like it. But partly because when you hear these people talk about, and it's so positive, it's so empowering, but that's not the whole story with these people's lives. Everybody has problems in their lives and they have doubts. So when you're not hearing that, you're almost kind of reading between the lines, or you're hearing someone sort of almost inhabit a character or something.
Does it almost trigger your imagination in a way too? Do you start to wonder what's going on in those people's lives?
Exactly. I mean, you read into some of some of the great gospel stars, and they had the same dramas that, you know, mainstream rock stars had. Sex and money, drugs, you know, you name it.
If you're taking a sample then that's quite gospel based in this record, do the lyrics almost become you trying to explore those kind of hidden corners to it that aren't usually seen in gospel music?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I think that is what I want. Because when I listen to that gospel music, I'm like, this music sounds so great. It's like everything about the music is beautiful. The pianos and the harmonies and the backing vocals, it's all great. The only problem that's missing for me is like the lyrics don't really hit even though some of the songs, the lyrics are great. Don't get me wrong. Like some of the songs are wonderful, but they're not, at least they're not exploring the full spectrum of emotion, you know, that's available. And that's kind of, at least that's something that not a lot of people have done, at least to my knowledge. See, I mean, it's something that I want to hear that I haven't heard before. That's kind of what is driving me to make it, I think.
Is this an idea you've had in your mind for a while then? Have you been listening to gospel music through the years? Is this something you've been pondering over?
Because I love gospel music. So I've always, you know, I've listened to it a lot, and I just thought, it did occur to me, I'm like, someone, you know, it'd be cool if someone made a gospel record that was about doubt and debauchery and everything that people in gospel music don't normally talk about. Would be interesting to me. So, you know, that wasn't available for me to listen to, and so I thought I'd make it myself if I could.
I like that idea of making music for yourself to kind of fulfill that hole.
Yeah, there's a lot of ideas that, you know, haven't been explored like that. You know,
it's interesting as well. If you're not a man of faith, where do you kind of find the themes that gospel music is talking about in your life?
Well,
the kind of hope and the empowerment.
Because it's easy because everyone feels, you know, the religious aspect is just sort of, you know, literally believing in religion is just sort of the overlay that they put on top of the things that everyone experiences, you know. Everyone feels inspired or despairing or searching, or everyone already does. They would relate to what they're trying to talk about anyways, even if you know, they're just turned off by the fact that it's sort of about a literal religion, which a lot of people don't subscribe to. So that's sort of, you know, a non-starter for a lot of people when they listen to gospel music. But me, I don't care. I mean, I can listen to someone talk about something that I don't believe in at all, and it still have value to me because at the core, it's still talking about things that anyone could relate to.
Do you believe in a higher power, even if you're not drawn to any particular religion?
I don't know. I mean, I think so. I mean, everyone kind of is. We all answer to something higher than complete. I mean, hopefully, unless you're like Donald Trump or something, you believe in something outside of yourself. I mean, there's a reason why we value the things most people value things like, you know, love and friendship, or like trying to be a good person, or all these things that are sort of outside of yourself. So you're lying if you say you don't believe in something beyond yourself. I mean, you're a fool, really. It doesn't have to be something like God, you know, literally God, but there has to be some reason why people at least pretend. Everyone's got to have a reason to believe, like Bruce Springsteen said.
Do you think that's maybe what draws us to tackling them in music as well? Like you mentioned love and friendship there. They're kind of, I mean, love in particular, that's the thing that most songs find themselves kind of circulating around.
Right. Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of overlap between, you know, a lot of these gospel artists. They wrote these beautiful songs that were talking about Jesus and God. And so, who was it? The famous, I think was it Sam Cooke? He started out as a gospel artist. One of my favorite songs is this song called, let me just look it up if I can, because it's pretty interesting. Easy to find. Well, while I look for it, I'll just explain the background. So there's this, of all the gospel songwriters, there's one in particular that I love better than all the rest. And it's this woman named Dorothy Love Cotes. And she just was a songwriter and totally worked in the gospel genre. She had some of the best songs, I mean, of all the people who wrote gospel music in the 50s and 60s, in my opinion. And so she had a song called 99 and a half, which is about, it has a great chorus that says, when you're referring to God, your faith in God, she says, 70 won't make it, 80 God just won't take it, 90 is close, and 99 is almost, but 99 and a half just won't do. That's referring to God's, your faith in God. And so, it's a really great chorus. And so whoever it was, a Wilson Pickett, that's who it was. So he came out with a song called, he just took that chorus and just, transcribed it to talking about a romantic relationship. And it's brilliant. It's like the same thing.
Like sampling almost.
Yeah. And so she also had a song, You Can't Hurry God, You'll Just Have to Wait. I mean, everyone knows the song that became. Can't Hurry Love, You'll Just Have to Wait. And so a lot of these songs, you can easily transcribe them to a romantic relationship, and people often do. And a lot of popular pop music tropes started in gospel. They just took God and replaced it with a man or a woman.
Because it's more relatable.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fascinating when I found out that some of these secular pop songs started out as gospel music, but it makes perfect sense when you stop and think about it.
Do you ever do that in your own music? Like ideas that you maybe explored when you first began creating music, will you come back to them later on and look at them in a different way, from a different angle?
I don't know. I'm not sure. There's definitely lyrics that from songs that were unreleased or something that I never finished, and I won't like the song in general, but there'll be a line or two that I'll then cherry pick later and sort of either put them in a new song or just make a new song kind of around those specific lyrics. That's happened before.
What would that lyric typically be? Would it be one of the ones referencing quite a specific experience?
I don't know. And there's a lyric. Well, there was one song that I purposely left off the French Exit B-sides tape, because even though it was probably one of the best of those B-sides, I was like, the chorus of this song is something that I think is really good. I think I'm just going to save it and use it for something else. And then it found its way into this new record that I'm working on. And it's the new chorus for this song that I'm working on, but I don't really want to reveal the exact lyric, Did the context change quite rapidly though? Yeah, I think so, because it was just sort of a clever line that I thought was good. It wasn't really the heart of the song before, but now I feel like when you really zero in on it, that became the hook of the song and sort of the purpose of the song. Did you only come back to it because you were looking through those demos? Or would you have gone back to it anyway if you weren't going to re-release that? It was because I was going through the demos and I thought, damn, that's a good lyric. I should probably just take that. And I was just working on a song concurrently on the new record. And, when I was trying to come up with a hook, I just started singing that. And I was like, oh, it works perfectly. It's funny how stuff just kind of happens in that way. Yeah. Yeah. How much stuff do you have in the archive then? Do you have quite a lot of demos and stuff kind of just hanging around from over the years? Oh yeah, I mean, tons of stuff. I mean, it's a lot of it's just in the form of just unfinished ideas or sketches. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I've never put out. I mean, there's whole albums I've never put out. Completed albums, finished, more or less. Not completed. How come they never kind of made it over the finish line? A lot of times they just kind of stall out and you just kind of start working on something else, and then that is better. And then you just kind of abandon that other thing. And then just time passes and you're like, well, what am I going to do about this now? This isn't even as good as what I'm working on now. So and I haven't even finished what I'm working on now. So I might as well just finish that. Were there any projects that kind of fell by the wayside before the gospel orientated album emerged? No, because after our last record, TV Girl record, I was sort of struggling with what direction to go on later. I felt like, the last record, it was good, but I don't think it's as good as the one before, because it was just a collection of songs, it wasn't as good as conceptually good as Who Really Cares, which I feel is very more cohesive as a whole as an album. And if I had to rate them, I would definitely put that one higher than the last one, even though I think the last one was good. Like I was talking before, it's Death of a Party Girl is a collection of good songs individually, but I don't think it holds together as cohesively as some of the ones before. So after that, after that album, I was like, well, I don't know what to do. I don't want to do that again. I don't want to just put together a collection of songs. So I have this idea for a gospel album. I'm going to at least see where that takes me. Does it make it easier to work on songs? Are they less likely to fall? Would that record be less likely to fall by the wayside as a whole because you have that strong concept at the heart of it? I think so. Yeah, because now that I have the idea, I'm like, I have to do this. It's too good of an idea not to put it out. Does it make it easier to make decisions throughout the process too? Yeah. If you have that idea at the core, yeah. To have that focus, because I'm like, well, it's all going to be gospel, so it kind of just focuses. You're like, well, I'm going to have something that sounds like this kind of style of gospel music. I'm going to have something that at least references this thing that they always talk about in gospel music. And, you know, when you're just writing a song just from scratch, you can talk about literally anything, go anywhere, use any sample, use any sound. So it does make it easier when you just have like a focus. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a better record. I mean, there's usually concept albums are pretty dodgy historically. Sometimes they're really good.
I feel like they're one or the other. They're either a grand slam home run or awful. There's not many in between concept albums.
Yeah, but I mean, even when they suck, I do have a respect for them, because you're like, well, I mean, they had this idea and they saw it through for better or worse, and you can't say that they didn't at least try to do something. They weren't at least trying to say something big or do something ambitious, like even if it fails miserably.
Are there any creative opportunities that an album like Death of a Particle offers you, though, that a concept album wouldn't? Just having that freedom to just put together a batch of songs. What does that kind of open up for you?
Well, it's the freedom, like you said. I mean, you can just do anything, go anywhere you want, use whatever you like. You can make it sound as disparate and kaleidoscopic and chaotic as you want, or if you have one song that's about something very specific but doesn't fit into your, you know, you might not be able to use it in your concept album because it doesn't go with that concept, even if it's a great song. So, I mean, some people's best records of their whole career are just a collection of singles that have nothing to do with each other. You know, I can think of tons of bands like that.
Which out of the two do you kind of learn more lessons from? Concept records or just collections of songs?
It's different because it's sort of just different. I don't know. It's like maybe the difference between when you're doing a concept album, you're really trying to make like a piece of art, you know, as a whole. There's certain, you know, skills that are not skills, but like certain muscles that are exercised in that versus just coming up with, you know, a couple catchy songs, which is, you know, it's not better or worse. It's just a different style, really. I mean, it's like the difference between making, I don't know, like a book or a poem, or the difference between making like a movie or a TV show, maybe, for example. It's like they're both like, you know, just as good as each other if it's done right, I think. But ultimately, probably the movie or the book is going to be a lot more, you know, when I think about things like good books that I've read in my life are probably the most impressive, like most meaningful thing, you know, because it's so hard and a lot of times it's so ambitious that when someone does it really good, it's like there's nothing quite like it. There's nothing as good as it.
Just because it's so vast and you can unpack so much.
Right. And you can talk about it so much and you can get as deep into it as you want. Whereas like, you know, a good poem is great, you know, but you read it in a second and it just doesn't have the impact that you can get, like, you know, by writing a huge novel. So, I mean, ultimately, I mean, it depends on what you're looking for, really, when you're listening to it. Sometimes you just want to listen to a heater of a single, you know, put it on the mix, no biggie. But if you're like me and you really love music, you know, a lot of times the best albums are just albums that are made by, you know, like an auteur level artist that is really firing on all levels and is really encompassing a work as a whole.
It's almost like, to kind of go with an analogy of what you were saying there, it's like albums are books and poems are songs, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, sure, that's good enough. I mean, I think that would hold snuff if you thought about it. Maybe. I'm not sure about that.
You got a book in you?
Oh, man. I tried to write something, but I just don't know. I don't know if it's too hard. It really is hard. It was so hard. And then I thought it just sucked. And then I was like, man, I'm like, I need to start working on music because like I actually have like obligations and people will actually listen to this. That's another thing. When you write a book, you're like, man, nobody's going to even read this shit. It's like a total vanity project.
When were you trying to write it?
After the last record. After Death of a Party Girl, I went to, well, it was a couple of years ago now. I went to New York with the idea that like I was just going to like take a 4 months, 5 months sabbatical in New York and just like not work on music at all and just write this like the idea for a book I had. And I did write a lot, but you know, not enough to like get close to like completing it. And then by the time I had to go back and tour, I was just swept up in music again. And that kind of just took over. And then that's like what I'm saying with the stuff that falls in the archives. That's how it happens. It's just like you move on to something else and then, you know, it's hard to come back to something, especially when it's something that's like, that's not going to have any necessary external rewards. even as far as attention or money or whatever it is.
Did it do anything for you creatively though? Could it have
Definitely
was it like a palate cleanser in any way?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was, that part of it was great. Just to sit and write and think about. It was going to be like I'm a skateboarder, and I was just thinking about the past and like my teenage years and my skate crew from when I was like in my middle and high school, and just like how it was sort of like going to be like a memoir almost of like the birth and death of like the adolescent skateboard crew, because like you start skating and that's your whole life and you're with your best friends, and then like slowly and surely people drop out because of whatever reasons. There's so much, because some people are good and some people aren't, because girls and drinking and other sports come into play, so everything kind of just like it's like you against the world, and it's being slowly picked apart by like the real life as you hit that like crucial age. And so it was going to be like a coming of age, bullshit based on like my real experiences with like my middle school skate crew, which was like so important to me back then. But like, I feel like most people who are in that crew probably never think about it, or like if that was important or what that meant to their lives in general. And I was like, that's kind of a shame, because it was so important to us back then.
Did you find yourself thinking about it quite a lot? Was that what brought you back to this idea of creating a book about it?
Well, I really was. Yeah. I was thinking about, and you just think about the past as you get older, and you think about, at least I do, think about all the people back then, and, how you were so close and then you drift apart, and what these people's lives are like. And it, it's almost a shame that it's not commemorated in some way. That's kind of what it was. It's like, this was just, in many ways, it was just the average story of like the adolescent Southern California skateboard, crew. It was like a big part of our lives back then. And it's just like almost forgotten, and that's kind of a shame, because it was, it's a shame that no one's commemorated that in some way, or talked about it, or thought about it.
I was watching, you see mid-90s.
I haven't seen it, but yeah, I mean, it's funny because just as I was thinking about this, like there was a whole spate of things that were definitely touching on similar themes that came out, including mid-90s.
But it would be interesting to explore in a book, because mid-90s is a very kind of brief look at that.
Yeah, I heard it was okay. I mean, I just have such bad... the track record of skateboard movies is just atrociously bad. So that's why I'd probably like not checked that out yet, but I probably should. Here's the best of the bunch.
I don't think I've seen many others.
Yeah, I mean there's been a couple, but they're all really, really bad.
What about like skateboard vlogging or podcasts? Do you ever get into that?
Yeah, I mean the only podcast I listen to is this podcast called The Bunt. It's a skateboard podcast, but vlogging is like, oh man, that was like hard to watch. That was like kind of sad to me almost. It's like, I can't believe something so cool like skating is like privy to these just like total loser, just totally lame people. It's like, it sucks. I can't believe they managed to suck like all the what's good and cool about skating out of skating. You can never completely do that, but like they're definitely trying their hardest.
I mean, like part of that ethos of skating though is that you don't care about it. That's part of what's cool about it. So as soon as you start trying to document it and film it in that way, right, you're setting yourself up for a fall. Right,
exactly. And that kind of thing, that kind of a gatekeeping attitude, as people call it, is like, has a really bad, it's like, people don't like that these days, but I'm like, man, there's like a good reason why people gatekeep skateboarding, is because it's supposed to be cool. You know what I mean? It's like, it's supposed to be exclusive. If you are a skater, there's like a certain language that you understand, that, and there's a certain way you look at the world that other people don't understand. Like that's like the point. That's what's good about it. And so like, I'm like, they should gatekeep. Like we should make fun of these people, because that's how historically skateboarders have like kept their community insular. Is like, because when people do a movie about skateboarding, the reason it's so bad is because, obviously the actors don't skate. The director, the writer probably doesn't skate. So like they're going to get things wrong, because it's just, if you're not in that culture, like you're just not going to be able to talk the talk. It's going to be obvious to someone who skates that you're not in it. It's like instantly obvious.
And that's the thing that's good about mid-90s, that they were all skaters before they were actors.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that probably helped the cause of the movie. I'm sure. I haven't seen it, like I said, but they're all really good skaters. And Jonah Hill, I mean, has some sort of, he was a skater. I mean, he can claim that. I don't know how deep into it he was, but he was definitely a skater at some point. So he has some sort of claim.
How deep into it did you get?
Well, I still skateboard. I mean, I live right next to a skate park, and I go every day. And sometimes I go out and film. It's a little hard because it's not hard, but it's different because, as you get older, especially at this age that I'm at now. Like I'm 33, and all my friends who started skating, even the ones I had made later in college, they've all moved away or they stopped skating. So it's hard to make new friends as you get older that are like age appropriate that still skateboard. But at least I'm in LA, where it's probably the most possible of all the places on the planet. But yeah, I mean, I love skating. I'm pretty nerdy about it, even though I was never that good. I mean, I'm better than most, obviously, because I've done it for so long. But even back then, in my adolescent skate career, I was like the worst one of the bunch. And it's ironic that I was the only one who kept doing it.
Have you kept doing it the whole way through, or did you go away for a little bit and come back?
I kind of gave it up. I also fell prey to the high school sports. I started playing water polo. My parents made me play a legitimate sport. I remember trying to convince them, like, I just want to skate. I don't want to play sports. They made me. So I had to kind of give it up to a big extent in high school. Yeah, it's funny because after I stopped playing the last game of water polo when I was a senior, I never played water polo again. Never thought about it again. But I took up skating again, and I've been doing that to this day. So
I guess water polo is a little less accessible too, though.
Yeah, I mean, definitely.
You can't just go out and water polo.
Yeah, no, the water polo is hard. It's hard to do in every way.
I heard you were a stand-up comic for a little bit too.
I mean, yeah, to a very minimal extent. But yeah, I did definitely do some open mics, probably about 10 of them.
Did you ever work skating into that?
I don't remember. I don't think so. That would have been a good gimmick, but no, I didn't think about that. I was really bad at it. I was really bad.
It's tough.
Yeah. Because I don't know. I think I'm maybe a decent writer. I think I could, if I really put my mind to it, I could have written jokes. Okay. But the performing aspect of it was I was totally lost. It was bad when I actually tried to get up there and say them. Just everything was wrong. Are
you a big reader? Is that what kind of leads into the writing?
Yeah. I've always been a big reader. I've always written stuff.
So you quite often quote people on the liner notes, I think, like passages from books, like Public Burning and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of my favorite books. Just thought it was sort of thematically resonant with the record. And I don't know, it just sounded cool. I mean, it just looks cool to put a vague quote. I always like when people do that.
Yeah. It's almost like sampling again, or referencing it. When you reference in your lyrics, is there a kind of crossover there too with sampling?
Yeah,
is it
definitely
all coming back to the same thing?
Especially all over our music is references to famous pop songs or twists on famous tropes or lines or whatever. I think that's, I don't know. It's just the way I think. I'm such a fan of music. I kind of can't help it. I'm pretty encyclopedic about music, and so if I'm writing something and something it's similar to a famous song that I know and and I can kind of twist it, I'll usually won't resist that impulse because, it adds kind of an extra layer of meaning, for the people who get the reference and stuff.
Yeah. I know that. Yeah. When you're listening to someone else's record and then they reference something and it clicks in your mind and you get that, it's almost like when you connect with it emotionally, but on another level, because you're connecting with exactly what they intended you to.
Mm-hmm. And you're having a conversation about, in a roundabout way, you're having, they said one thing and then you sort of say something that either relates to it or contradicts it. And you're just kind of having a back and forth with famous artist who said something really iconic at some point. We were talking
about books a little bit a few minutes ago, because you've got the Pynchon reference as well it's on Who Really Cares, isn't it? I'm trying to think of the song.
Taking What's Not Yours.
Taking What's Not Yours, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite authors also.
You read all his stuff?
I've read everything but one book. I'm on an ongoing project to read all of them, and I have one to go.
Are you saving it?
I'm not saving it. I'm just reading other things right now, and I'll get around to it when I can really, because I'll go through periods where I, the one I have to read is his longest one. It's Against the Day, which is 1,000+ pages. So that's going to be a whole summer where I'm going to have to put aside to really read that.
At least.
And right now I'm reading another big book, and that's how I kind of had to. I like reading really big, long marathon books, and then I'll palate cleanse with short books or my favorite easy popcorn read. I love music biographies. Those are really easy and really fun to read usually. So I'll pad it out with some of that. Right now I'm rereading a book called The Salt Weed Factor. And that's one of my favorite books of all time. And I'm rereading it. It's even better than the first time I read it. And that's over 700 pages. So after I read that, I have a Ricky Lee Jones's new autobiography, which will be fun, I think.
What brings you back to reread something?
I don't know. I kept telling people about just how I think I lent it to my friend, and I was like, "You need to read this," and he just never read it. And then I was like, "Man, like this book's so fucking good. Like you got to read it." And then he just didn't. And I was like, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna read it again." It was like I kept telling him to read it and talking about how good it was, and I convinced myself like it really was like just a great book, like one of the best I've ever read. And I hardly ever reread books, and I'm like, I guess I should do that sometimes. Like it's hard to reread books because there's so many books you haven't read, but you know, every once in a while, I think you should go back and reread books. It's definitely a good experience.
Do you find yourself relating to it in a different way? When was it? When did you read it the first time? How many years ago?
I read it in college as part of a class. I think I was literally the only person who actually read it because back then, you know, it was like a semester, an English course where we had, I think it was about early American history. We had to read like 12 books and it was just impossible. You know, nobody could, especially when you have 4 other classes that are also English classes with 12 other books you have to read for each class. It's like just literally impossible to actually read everything. So people would just, you know, read Spark Notes or just get by based on descriptions of other people online. And so this book, The Sought Weed Factor, which is 700 pages long, I was like, you know, probably nobody read it. And I was like, man, I'm going to read it just because like I started reading it. I was like, man, this is like so good. Cause it's not even from the early American history. All the other stuff we had to read was of that time period. And this is a book written in the 60s that takes place in the early Americas. And it was like a postmodern author, John Barth, who was like, you know, related to Thomas Pynchon, who was my favorite author back then. And so I was like, I'm just going to read the whole book because, you know, no one else is going to read it. So I'm just going to do it. And I loved it. So now I just am rereading it. And it's like, it's even better than I remember. It's like one of the most fun books I've ever read. And it's deep. And everything.
Did you say it's kind of a postmodern look back at that time?
It is, yeah. It uses, it looks at early America as through, you know, definitely a 60s postmodern lens, which is interesting. I mean, Thomas Pynchon has done that a lot to great effect too.
Is that kind of what you're doing with the gospel record? Looking back at that type of music through a modern lens?
I don't know, because that music is still, it's always evergreen. You know, it's one of these subgenres which never kind of changes in a way, you know? They're still singing gospel music today that's kind of talking about the exact same things they were talking about in the 50s. It's just the superficial style has changed over the years. That's it. Themes are evergreen.
Same thing with music at large a little bit. If you look at what pop songs we're talking about in the 80s.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess there was more of an optimism about some of the 80s stuff maybe. And a darkness to it as well. Though.
Yeah.
Everything moves in cycles.
That's true. I mean, yeah, that's a good point. Music is like that, I think, you know, because there's only, like I'm saying, you can only talk about so many things in the space of a song. So like most people are going to talk about, you know, most people resort to talking about romantic relationships and like those issues are evergreen, you know, there's the same problems that were in the 60s are the exact same problems we have in relationships today. So it's like, it's only the style has changed. That's it. And sometimes not even that. So
yeah. I mean, if we come back to vaporwave, it's very much emulating an older style.
Yeah, but I mean, I was more referring to there's just, if you want to listen to a band that sounds like it was in the 60s, like there's lots of bands that like try as hard as they can to sound like as authentically 60s as possible today, you know?
It's an interesting thing. We're kind of at one of the periods in history where that feels most accessible. There's always someone trying to emulate something, but then there's also new stuff occurring. Like like we were saying a minute ago, it's very postmodern.
Yeah, I mean we live in just a postmodern stew. It is kind of a weird time. I mean, I don't really have other times to judge it against so much. You only have your own personal lens. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's definitely opened up, and yeah, I mean, what can I say about it? It's like, yeah, you can listen to anything, literally anything from any period of history right next to each other with no effort. Which is good and bad, like everything.
It feels like it maybe devalues it in some ways, but then in other ways it's quite liberating from a creation standpoint, maybe.
Yeah, and from just a listening pleasure or something, there's nothing wrong with listening to a song from the 60s next to a song from today, next to an 80s song. It's just a bit schizophrenic and, you might not get as deep into a certain genre like you might, back in the 80s. If you're really into goth music, you really had to invest in being into that lifestyle to really access what you needed to find out what the good records were, to go to the good shows. You had to be in that life. Whereas now, if you have an interest in goth music, you can listen to the most obscure, storied record from the 80s by some band that only put out one record and never played a show. And like, you can listen to it and you can think, oh, that was pretty good. And then just like forget about it and listen to something else. It's like back then, if you managed to track down that record, it means that you had gone through the work of like, finding out about it, getting it, listening to it. And by that time you'd probably really value it and think, it'd probably be your favorite record or something like that. Or you'd at least think it was like really special.
Does it come back to what, we're talking, or you were saying earlier on about how the skateboarding culture kind of has that gatekeeping thing, which is very much mirrored in what you were saying there with the goth culture?
Yeah.
Does it kind of come back to, yes?
It does, definitely. I mean, that's the good thing about skating is that there is a level that outsiders just can't do that with skating because they just won't be able to. I mean, it's hard to skate, And in order to learn, you have to do it every day. And in order to do it every day, you'll probably make friends with other skaters and et cetera, et cetera. So if you want to be in that culture, like you can't just be a tourist. You'll be found out immediately. It's kind of similar with goth culture. Maybe, I don't know. It's like, I'm not sure. I'm not really in goth culture, but I assume like, if you're into goth stuff or whatever, and you go to a goth show and start talking to someone who's really all about that life, like they'll know if they're talking to someone who doesn't know anything about it, and they'll hold that against you, rightly so.
They'll find you out.
Yeah.
What part of the process of creating is the most emotional for you?
Well, I mean, probably sometimes performing old music is kind of an emotional thing. Just the nature of touring, you have to go sing songs talking about emotions that you once had that now you don't, about people you once knew and now you don't. And so that can bring memories flooding back, or it can just get you thinking on life and the path of your life and the path of other people's lives and how they've intertwined and diverted and et cetera, et cetera. So like it can be, I don't want to say intense, but it can just it can bring emotions about in you that you weren't really planning on, or you wouldn't have otherwise delved into, because you just have to sing them night after night and kind of revisit that headspace again and again.
You develop tools to deal with that.
Well, yeah, you develop, I mean, for me, at least you necessarily just kind of have to develop a distance, I mean, for me, live performing is like, I consider myself a writer first, songwriter second, and a performer like distant third, something I do because like I kind of have to. It's not something I really gravitate towards. So when we do a show, it's just like, well, this is just a show. I'm basically playing dress up here, and I'm just like doing what I think is like the tropes of a show. I'm basically writing what I think a show is. And some performers, that is their main outlet. They love performing, and they really get off on that connection with the audience, and that's where it's at for them. But that's not what it's like for me. So when I do a show, there's sort of a distance, an ironic distance a lot of times.
What is that part of what drives you to keep making stuff? Once you've developed a distance with your old music, do you feel the need to kind of create new stuff?
I don't know. I feel like you're just compelled, if you are a writer, you're just compelled to write. It's just that's what makes you a writer or not, You're just compelled to do it for whatever reason. Like I would be writing if I wasn't in a popular band. I would still be making music. I'm sure about that. I don't know. Yeah, it's just like a compulsion, really.